so, where I grew up, there were three avenues out: rapper, athlete, drug dealer. And no one told us about you could be an entrepreneur. No one said that you could be an executive of a company. No one where I come from knows that you can be a pharmaceutical rep. Like, people are like, what is that? And so I just felt a deep responsibility to give back and do some teaching on, hey, you can get out of here. And here's how. It's going to require a ton of hard work. It will not be easy, but you can get out of here legally.
Hi, JeVon. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Man, Nick, what's going on, sir?
Not much. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today. So just a brief intro for you. You were born the son of a drug-dealing pimp father and a struggling single mom. You were raised in the slums of Dayton, Ohio. You suffered abuse and racism, and you even went to Juvie a couple of times.
Three times.
But as the title of your book says, you overcame all of this to achieve the American dream, and you're now the author of I Got There and the president and CEO of Scribe Media, which in 2018 was awarded #1 company culture in America, which is insane. And as someone who has been following Scribe since its inception, since the days when it was still called Book in a Box, it's been amazing to watch it grow and positively impact the amount of people that it has. So welcome to the podcast, sir.
My man, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
I want to give the listeners some background for how I was introduced to you, obviously through Scribe, but I met you the first time was at your book signing here in Austin, Texas for I Got There. And
oh, man.
I remember I was, I think 21, maybe 22 at the time. And I was sweating. I was so nervous. I went up to shake your hand and I didn't even want to speak because I was so nervous that I didn't want to waste your time. And so it's a true honor to be here talking to you today.
My man, you just made my day. I'm humbled, man. I am just someone who worked hard and got to where I am. So yeah, there was nothing special in shaking my hand, man. I just work hard.
And that's actually where I want to start, because you signed my book and you wrote, "Don't ever stop hustling."
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I think I'm not remembering incorrectly, you have a story with the word hustle, and It sort of changed when you started working at Scribe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting, man. That was back in 2017. You and I would have met then. And for me, I grew up, like you said, my dad was a black pimp and drug dealer, and my mother is white. And so the word hustle for me has a whole different meaning, whole different context where I come from. Hustlers make ends meet, they make things happen legally, illegally, however it's got to be done. So I grew up around real pimps, drug dealers, hustlers. And so hustle for me always meant find a way to make it happen, no matter what. Unfortunately, just like the word pimp, pimp is when you actually look at what a real pimp is, a pimp puts women on a street corner, they sell their bodies, and the pimp takes all the money. Unfortunately, our society somehow glamorized the word pimp, pimp my ride, pimp my apartment, and they turned the word pimp, a negative word, into a positive. Well, for me, back to the word hustle, I felt that our society also turned a word hustle, which was once positive for me, and turned it into a negative. Everyone's a hustler now. Everyone's, hustle nonstop, grind all day, don't sleep. And I just find that the word hustle was taken out of context and was not used correctly. What I discovered about myself, furthermore, was that I was known for only sleeping 3-4 hours a night, and just killing it the next day, grinding, making it happen. And what I discovered is when I started sleeping like 6 hours a day versus 3 or 4, I accomplished more. And so for all those years that I associated hustling with 3-4 hours of sleep and don't sleep, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm actually getting more accomplished on 6.5 hours of sleep than I was on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. So I totally just said, that's it. I'm taking the word hustle out of my vocabulary. I don't like what society has turned the word into. And furthermore, again, man, to me, there's just a lot of fake people using the word hustle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from your book at that time. I reread it this last week, and I took so many different lessons away now that I'm a little bit older. But when I read it the first time, my biggest takeaway was be the best at your job, no matter what job that is.
Yep.
Because where I grew up in Cancun, Mexico, and this is a generalization, but the area that I grew up in was very affluent, and nobody had a job in high school. I didn't have a job until I went to college. And so what I learned was you should go to college. You shouldn't get just any job. But I dropped out of college and I moved to Austin, and I started working food trucks and any other kind of job. And I remember reading your book and for the first time in my life, sort of realizing like, okay, as long as I work hard, that's what really matters. And I love the story about the wife and husband that hired you for their candle store
yeah.
when you were working as a janitor, I believe.
Yeah.
And so if you've changed your sort of perspective on the word hustle, how would you, I guess, for lack of a better word, update that? Be the best at your job be the best at your job, but don't just grind yourself to death.
I'll share this, and I got to be fair because I didn't put this in the book. It actually, a lot of things came to light for me afterwards. That book was the first time that I spoke about my life, spoke about my past. As you know, I never wanted that book to be public. But one of the things that was interesting, it was my dad who actually taught me that. He said that no matter what you do in life, be the best at it. He said, if you're going to sweep the streets for a living, be the best street sweeper. Now, he could have given me a little more to aspire to, but I got the point. And so that's where that came from. So how have I replaced it now? Straightforward work ethic. And I've now put myself in a position, I say this, and I've always said this, I just use the word hustle with it as well. I'll never let anyone outwork me. And that doesn't mean people don't work harder than me. So let's put that in context. No one will outwork me, meaning results driven. There's a lot of people who work harder than me, people who are laying sod in landscaping here in Texas in August when it's 103 degrees. Oh yeah, they all work harder than me, but I'll never let anyone outwork me. And so for me, there's a difference between those two. So really what it comes down to, what I replaced it with is just pure work ethic, because some people will put on a fake hustle show, but don't truly have a deep down driven work ethic.
And was it ever hard for you to not let that sort of create this gray area with your self-esteem? Because that happens to me a lot, where if I'm not producing results, I start to feel bad about myself. And what was that like for you?
Yeah, I'm a producer, man. I don't know that I ever let it shake my self-esteem, and here's why. How I grew up, At times, all I had was confidence, man. I may not have had food. I not have had electricity. We may not have had water to be able to flush the toilet. But when I woke up in the morning, I had confidence. Confidence was always free. You have a choice. When you wake up in the morning, you can be timid and meek, or you can be confident. And I always made the choice, okay, I'm going to be confident today. I'm going to be positive today. Negativity has never done anything for anybody. So confidence has never really been, I've never been shook by confidence. Risk has never shook my confidence or shaken my confidence. So confidence is always been a good friend of mine, if you will.
Yeah, it's probably a lot to do with childhood, right? And the way that we learn to love ourselves. What is so? There's a lot of kids that are in the same situation right now that you were in 30 or however many years ago. And there's a mention at the end of the book that you're doing a lot of work to help those kids. I'm curious, what has that been like 3 years, 4 years after the publication of the book? And just what's the feeling and the emotion that you get when you're able to give back to those kids that you see yourself in?
So here's something that's always been big for me, and this actually came to me when I was at the when I was the president of the software company. I realized, wow, I became president of a software company and I don't write code. And I started thinking about all the things that I had done in life and how I got to where I am. And I realized that, wow, where I come from, there's a lot of people that don't know how to get here. So I felt this deep responsibility, not obligation, a deep responsibility to go back and share the things that I had learned with those kids, those high risk youth that were right on the cusp of, okay, this kid may be getting ready to go to jail for several years, and now he's going to be a felon, and he's going to have that on his record. And so, where I grew up, there were three avenues out: rapper, athlete, drug dealer. And no one told us about you could be an entrepreneur. No one said that you could be an executive of a company. No one where I come from knows that you can be a pharmaceutical rep. Like, people are like, what is that? And so I just felt a deep responsibility to give back and do some teaching on, hey, you can get out of here. And here's how. It's going to require a ton of hard work. It will not be easy, but you can get out of here legally. And that became the motivation. That and also doing the backpack drives. It's interesting. As a society, we always preach, get your education, get your education. Education's number one priority. And what I've always found funny about that is, okay, so education is the number one priority, but if I don't even have the tools, how am I supposed to get an education? I remember showing up to school and I didn't have the school list. I didn't have paper. I didn't have pencils. I didn't have anything on that school list. But you're telling me education is the most important thing. Well, I don't even have the tools to get an education. So the backpack drive became a big thing for me, to where we buy backpacks for elementary schools, fill them with the complete supply list, so kids at least have the tools.
And I'm sure that even just publishing the book, you've gotten a lot of feedback from young entrepreneurs or young people like myself that were impacted in ways that you maybe didn't even imagine possible. Um, you mentioned not having the tools and not having the school list and all these things. And one of the conversations I remember, or one of the speaking points from your book signing that I really remember, was Tucker Max was sort of interviewing you, and you talked about, and this is in the book, about the sort of imposter syndrome of, well, I didn't get my college degree, and you're in this meeting where a bunch of other guys are asking you, where did you go to school? What's your elite school that you went to?
Yeah.
And a really close friend of mine, when we were in high school, he was able to go to the same school that I was able to go to because of his scholarship that they granted him. And we had a conversation recently where he said he felt very sort of inferior to everyone at that school. And I was able to tell him about that story that you shared where I was like, you don't get it. I was just there because my parents had money. You were
Right.
there because you were actually putting in the work.
Right.
And so when was was it that meeting, or when was the moment that you realized you were struggling with that sort of, just call it imposter syndrome? And what did you do to get out of it?
Oh man, I struggled with that my whole life. You know, you know this. I never wanted anyone to know my story. There are so many people who assumed I had a college degree, who assumed I had an MBA. There's people who assumed when I lived in San Antonio, Texas. There's people who assumed that I was Mexican because of my skin tone. There's people who thought I was Puerto Rican, Middle Eastern. You know, and whatever I was whatever I needed to be to get to wherever I wanted to go. But imposter syndrome really stayed with me probably up until about 3, 4 years ago, because I didn't have the credentials. I've never had the credentials, but I always knew my fallback was, okay, you may have the degree, you may have the parents, you may have the pedigree, all those things, but you're not going to outwork me. And so outworking people just became my thing of, okay, I can put in more hours. Okay, I can go harder. I can go longer. I can do it better. But imposter syndrome, man, the whole time that stayed with me. I didn't want anybody to know that my dad was a pimp and drug dealer and had 23 kids, and I don't know where my last name comes from. I mean, who's going to want to be in a relationship with that guy? Who's going to want to
Right.
do business with that guy? So yeah, man, imposter syndrome stayed with me for years.
And are there ever any days where you wake up and you have like intrusive thoughts, or like a little moment where there's hints of it, or does it fully go away?
I would say for me now, yeah, I would say now it's fully gone away. I wanted to take time and really consider that. You know, now I've sat back. I was meeting with my executive coach Larry, and he gave me something that really meant a lot to me. My whole life, I was always out to prove something, prove I belong, prove I could do it, prove. Everything was always I was proving something to myself, to other people. And he gave me a phrase that said, look, you no longer have anything to prove, but you have a lot more to build. And when we went through my life and I look at it, I have an amazing wife. I have 4 healthy children. I live in a gated community. My kids go to private Christian school. I'm the CEO of an amazing company. I'm the largest equity holder of the company now. It's truly, I don't have anything else to prove. Now there's a whole lot more I want to build. There's, you know, I want to continue to be a great husband, a phenomenal father, an incredible leader, but I don't have anything else to prove to anyone.
Hmm. I really like the way that you phrase that. And I want to get into your sort of some of your family life. But before I do, for people who maybe don't know all that much about the book that I have here says JT McCormick. And
Yeah.
I know recently that you sort of took back ownership of your first name, JeVon. Can you talk about the story behind that?
So, man, back in my early 20s, I remember trying to land appointments, get on people's calendars, and, you know, just trying to break in. And I remember I could not get on anyone's calendar. I couldn't get an appointment to save my life. And then one gentleman got on the phone with me and he said to me, he goes, hey, how did you get a black first name? Because my name's JeVon, and an Irish last name, McCormick. What was funny to me is here I was in my early 20s. I didn't even know my last name was Irish. So I had just learned something. And but then when I hung up with him, I realized, oh, I'm not getting on people's calendars because they're seeing my first name. So my full name is JeVon Thomas McCormick. So I said, okay, I'm going to start going by JT McCormick. It's a little more ambiguous. And so I'll be damned. The following week, started getting appointments, started getting on people's calendars. I was like, wow. So here I am now, 49 years old. And last year, the protests broke out. The George Floyd situation, and well, let's call it what it is, the George Floyd murder on video. And what struck me was I saw a bunch of status signaling going on. People talking about Blackout Tuesday, Blackout Tuesday on Twitter and social media, and we were arguing about syrup bottles, for God's sake. And I'm like, okay, what does that really change? And it hit me. I read a piece where it said there were only three Black Fortune 500 CEOs. And so I went and looked it up, and I saw it was Roger Ferguson, and these are great guys. Love these guys because they made it to the top. Roger Ferguson, Marvin Ellison, and Kenneth Frazier. And I thought, three very ethnic void names, if you will. I said, there's no JeVon up there. There's no Rayvante. There's no LaQuanda, Lucretia, Martavius. And I said, you know what? Okay, I've made it here. I'm CEO of a company. We've done some great things as a company. I'm going to take my name back, and I'm going to go by JeVon McCormick. Because again, that was one of those moments where I'm like, I don't have anything else to prove to anyone. And I made the decision to start going by JeVon again, because I want all those kids that grew up in the neighborhoods that I did, the Laquans, the Jamarcuses, the Laquandas, to be able to see, hey, a JeVon, an ethnic name, made it to the CEO role. And my goal is, maybe one day they work in the office space with not just JTs, but JeVons and Rayvantes.
Yeah. And this might be, I wasn't sure how to phrase this question, but so my dad's Mexican, my mom's American, like white American. And I think until I saw you change your name and sort of talk more about that and read your book, I had not considered myself a mixed race person. And I realized I bounced back and forth, right? So when I was in Mexico, I had it the other way, because you wanted to be like the group that you were with. When I was with my Mexican friends, I wanted to be American because that's what they liked. And when I was with my American friends, I wanted to be Mexican because they were like, you're from paradise, and et cetera, et cetera. What's something like I'm not going to get calls if I put my first name on there? What's a lesson like that a mixed race person might not know that they don't know?
Wow. Yeah. It's funny. I was asked this question. Someone asked me, okay, would you go back and do it again with your name? And I said, yes. It served me. It got me to where I wanted to go, where I was trying to get to. And so I would do it again. What's something a mixed race person, I would say now more than ever in our country is, and I say this happily, be proud of who you are. Claim both sides. I'll share with you something that really offended me and disappointed me. It wasn't so much offensive. It disappointed me when it happened. When Barack Obama was elected president, everyone talked about how it was the first Black president of America. And for me, I knew he was mixed race. I knew his mom was white and his dad was Black, and he lived in Kansas. I mean, come on, Kansas is one of the whitest states in the country. He lived in Kansas with his white grandparents for a spell. And it really bothered me that no one took the time to say he was the first mixed race president. He was the first president that was mixed race, Black and white. And why that bothered me is growing up, there wasn't a lot of people that I had to look up to who were mixed race. And there it was, wow, the first mixed race president. But everyone referred to him as the first Black president. And what bothered me even further is, in our country, if you go back and understand the history of our country, there's a written law that said if you have one drop of Black blood in you, you were considered Black. And I've always looked at that like, well, I'm not going to succumb to, excuse my language, a bullshit law. I got a half white mom that I'm very proud of. I got a white mom that I'm very proud of. I got a Black dad that I'm proud of. Even though he was a pimp and drug dealer, I'm proud that was my dad. And so I've always been proud of being both white and Black. So to answer your question, I would say now more than ever, don't edit yourself. Don't do what I did, um, because society now has changed the game a bit to where um, people are embracing the ethnicity, the difference, the mixed race, and we need to continue on with that rather than hide from it.
Hmm. Your dad, you say you were really proud of him, and I think the part of the book that impacted me the most is the funeral. Maybe because of my relationship with my own dad, but reading it the second time, I sort of picked up on the you didn't want to go. I had sort of overlooked that the first time, and through conversations with friends, you changed your mind and you did make the hard decision to go. And then you gave a speech. And can you just talk me through the decision to go, and also what you were feeling when you decided to go and give that speech?
So when I found out he passed away, it was a Friday, and my little brother had emailed me, said our dad had passed away. And I literally I had no emotion. I went to work that day. I worked and I had no emotion, didn't shed any tears. And you got to remember, I hadn't seen or spoken to my dad in over 35 years. So I was emotionless. And I shared with my mom, I shared with my wife, and both of them said, "Oh yeah, you should go, you should go." And I'm like, "For what? I don't even know that person." And I thought to myself, you always hear those people who look back and say, "Oh, I regret this and I regret that." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to go because I don't ever want to sit back and say I regret something." So I went, and I remember I got to the funeral and the viewing the day before, and I remember looking at my dad, and literally I did not know the man that was in the casket. That wasn't the man that I knew. The man that I knew was always in suits, smiling. Everyone loved him, and so I didn't know the person that was laying there. So the next day comes the funeral, and what blew me away was how many people actually showed up to this funeral. I didn't think people were going to be there, and it was packed. They had to open these back doors so people could stand there,
Wow.
and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that many people actually loved my dad. And so I'm hearing all these stories. Each person had 2 minutes to go up and speak, their memory of my father, if you will. And I'm listening to all these stories and I'm amazed. I'm like, wow, I never knew that. I never knew that. And then my amazement turned into frustration. Then my frustration turned into anger. I'm like, wait a minute. He did that for you. He never even came to pick me up. What the hell is this? So then it hit me. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go up there and I'm gonna give my 2 minutes. And I walked up to the microphone and I thanked everybody. I said, hey, I thank you all for sharing these stories. I never knew some of these things about my father. I said, but the reason why I'm here today is because the father that I knew, he would always call and say he was going to come pick me up and he would never show. And I'd stand in that window for hours, loyal. He'll be here, he'll be here. And he never showed. And so I said to the crowd, I go, so wherever my dad is right now, be it heaven, be it hell, wherever he is, I didn't want him to wait for me like I waited for him. And I walked
Mm.
off and I paid for his funeral. He died penniless. Didn't even have the money to pay for his own funeral, and I paid for my father's funeral.
Wow. You mentioned not wanting to regret the not going, and that you hadn't seen him in 35 years. So for me, the my relationship with my parents there's always been this sort of worry, right? That if I take space to work on myself and I don't see or talk to them for a certain amount of period, that I will somehow regret this. Um, was it like an active choice you made at one point to tell yourself, all right, I'm not going to see my dad again for X amount of time? Or what was that separation like for you?
When I left Dayton, I was 15 years old. I got reunited with my mother. I was 15, And my dad, at one point in my life, back when I was 12, he had left. He just went to England one day and said, I'll be back and I'm going to be gone 2 weeks. And he was gone for over a year and he left. He left me. And so what I realized, my dad in leaving me, my dad in having 23 children, my dad did not value family. And my dad was all about himself. He gave me some great lessons to this day. I'm thankful for those lessons that he gave me, but he didn't value family. So it never really bothered me that I was gone and we never reconnected because, he didn't look for me. I didn't look for him. And I made peace with that. I didn't have any regrets or animosity. I still don't, I don't walk around with, man, I sure would have liked to have sat down with my dad. And no, I don't know if it's a respect, but he chose his life, and I have to accept that. So no, I don't. I never sat back and thought to myself, oh, well, I feel like I should have reached out or I should have done this. No, I didn't have any of that. There's only one thing I actually would have liked my father to have seen. This part actually isn't in the book because it happened after the book came out. So when I was a kid, this part actually, the first part actually is in the book. Do you remember the part where I say when I was a kid, my dad would always tell me that the only difference between him and the CEO of Budweiser is that our government chose to make the CEO of Budweiser his drug legal because alcohol prohibition was illegal at one point. And so my dad would always give this story about how, the only difference between me and the CEO of Budweiser is our government makes his drug legal. And we would hear this as a kid. He would say it all the time. And so back 2 years ago, I had the incredible blessing to be on the cover of a leadership magazine. And on the cover of this magazine is the hedge fund billionaire Leon Cooperman, the 4-star General Petraeus, Heisman Trophy winner Bo Jackson. And I'm on this magazine. But here's what's mind-blowing. On this magazine, right above me, is the CEO of Budweiser. And when I saw that, man, I'm man enough to admit I cried. I was like, wow, well played, Dad, well played. I would have liked him to have seen that. Not have met my family because he didn't value family, not to have seen my career, but that he could have seen that his son was on the same magazine cover as the CEO of Budweiser.
That's wild. That's really amazing. When did you know that you were ready or that you wanted to be a father?
Man. It's I appreciate the question, Nicholas. Back when there was a line in a Tupac song, it said, if you don't have time to be a father, it's a crime to even bother. And that always stood out to me of, okay, yeah, I agree with that because I felt like my dad just never made time, never had time. He went and did whatever he wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to be a good dad and try and be a good dad. But man, I couldn't even hold a relationship. I was horrible in relationships. I was a monster, didn't know how to treat women. It was sad, man. I didn't know how to conduct myself. I wanted to get better, but I had no clue what that looked like, how to do it. And to be honest, I didn't try very hard either.
How did that, like, there's a lot of sort of missing gaps in one sense for me of like, I read and consume a lot of content about emotional work, right? And as I was reading your book, I was like, did JeVon go to therapy? Did he do this? Like, what was, but then I started to notice, okay, his life was just naturally sort of presenting him with opportunities to grieve and to move on. But was there ever any, I guess, more of like a traditional form of emotional work that you did?
So, man, I'll put this out there. Life didn't present anything to me. I had to go make the presentation and make it appear for me. And I'll always say this too: nothing was given to me. Even when people will say, "Oh, they gave me an opportunity." No one ever gave me an opportunity. If you hired me, it's because you had an open position that you needed to fill. I had I had to go make the opportunity. I could have flamed out and you could have fired me, or I can go in there and outwork everyone and create an opportunity for myself. So I always, through the grace of God, created my own opportunities. As far as therapy is concerned, man, a lot of life for me just came down to decision making. I
Mm.
tried to go to therapy once in my early 30s. I'll never forget this lady. I went to therapy and I started off. I said, "Can I ask you some questions first?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Where'd you go to medical school, or where'd you get your PhD?" And she said, "University of Texas." And I was like, "Okay, great, great." I said, "Did you come from a two-parent home?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Did your parents pay for your college?" And she said, "Yes." And I remember she stopped me. She goes, "Well, wait a minute. We're here for you, not me." And I said, "Well, hold on." I go, I don't want to do this." And she said, "Why?" I said, "I don't know how you're going to relate to anything that I come from. You come from a total opposite world from me. So I don't know what it is that you're going to be able to share with me and help me." Now, that could have been a very selfish way of looking at it. It could have been very closed minded. But at the time, in my early 30s, it was my mindset. And so everything from then on became just like everything with me in life. Taught myself how to invest in stocks, taught myself how to work in the mortgage game, taught myself how to sell enterprise software. Here I am, the CEO of a publishing company. Everything has been self-taught. And when I needed to learn how to have relationships, it was because I went dead broke. I had no more money, and all I was left with was my character. And I did not like the character and the man that I had become, because I was a lot like my father, and I had to look in the mirror and own that.
Mm. Self-taught. That's for that kind of work. For me, it's always been um, difficult, I guess, because there's a lot you can learn a lot of the theory, but it's been hard for me without the support to be able to implement those things. Um, they say that children reflect sort of your own past and your traumas back onto you. So, what's been one of the biggest challenges for you as a father?
The biggest challenge for me as a father is how how do I give my children everything, but teach them to appreciate it? The very reason I appreciate all the things I have is, material things, is because I didn't have them. The fact that I can go to the pantry and there's food in there, I didn't have that. You open the refrigerator and there's the food, I didn't have that. My kids grow up in that. My kids grow up in a gated community. They go to private Christian school. I didn't have that. And so the biggest challenge for me as a father is, how do you give your children everything and teach them to appreciate it? That's the biggest challenge that I have as a parent.
Hmm. And biggest challenge to okay. Um, so I guess as a leader, and this is like a sort of a two-part question, but you are a mentor to a lot of people, and I know you're a father to your children, but in a way you're also their mentor and their leader. How do you, because they say you can't change somebody by just telling them what to do. How do you go about that? Aside from the whole just model the behavior you want them to, like in direct mentorships, what is your, I guess, strategy or?
So I'm a big believer in the things you say to yourself. So with my children, sometimes up to 3 times a day, I'll come up to them and I'll say, "Okay, what are your things?" And they'll say, "I'm smart, I'm great, I'm a leader, hard work is greatness, positive attitude, and stand up for yourself. And they say that they can recite it top of mind, no questions asked. They don't need you to help them fill in the gaps. They will roll that off to you. The 7-year-old, the 5-year-old, the 3-year-old, and even our little guy, 2-year-old, who can barely speak. You hear him say, and he kind of mumbles it because he's heard it. He's heard his brothers and sisters say it so many times. He's got the cadence down. You can't understand it, but you hear the cadence of what he's saying. And that for me is very critical because, like I said to you, when I was a kid, man, sometimes all I had was confidence. That was it. And so I believe truly for me, the power of the spoken word. You've heard people say sticks and stones won't break my bones, but may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Bullshit. Words hurt like a mother. And I believe in the power of the spoken word. And so I really want my children to be positive, to have a positive mental outlook on life. You don't, negativity has never done anything for anybody. So that's very critical for me to let them know that, be positive. And I've even passed the 3 words for me that I eliminated from my vocabulary. I've passed them down to them. In our house, we don't say hope, we don't say wish, and we don't say luck. Those 3 words do not come in our house.
For me, the biggest word has been should, at least in the last couple of years. So I'm going to have to add those 3 to my vocabulary too. So just briefly, before we end the call, I want to talk about Scribe a little bit more. What is one of the most important lessons you've learned from your tribe at Scribe?
I am only as good as the great people I work with is the number one thing that I can tell you I've learned as a leader. And that lesson actually carried over from when I was the president of a software company. It's funny, CEOs are celebrated, but the fact of the matter is I don't do the work. I don't execute. All the people I work with are the ones executing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I make some decisions. Yeah, I set some direction, so on and so forth. But you're only as good as the great people you work with. When those great people become exceptional, then I'm allowed to be great. But as long as they're great, I'm just good. And I always put people first. I'll always live by that. If for whatever reason, I will take a subpar year financially to always put people first. And even last year during the virus disruption, last March when the country went shelter in place, we took a massive revenue hit, as with most of the businesses in the country. And about 3 days after we went shelter in place, we made the announcement to our tribe. We call ourselves a tribe. And I said, look, no one in this company will be laid off due to the virus. And it was a bold ass statement because of the amount of uncertainty that everybody still faced. But we ended up having the best year in company history. We're 6 years old. We had the best year in company history. We ended up hiring 22 new people. We paid out a profit share at the end of the year. And like I said, it was our best revenue year, best profitable year in company history.
Yeah, it's been amazing through different podcasts to hear about your transition as a tribe and some of the stuff that you asked of the tribe, and very, very something I've been trying to emulate just for myself in any ways that I can. Last question, 2 books that Scribe has published that have impacted you the most personally, and 2 upcoming books that Scribe is going to be publishing that you're excited about.
So, one, I got to go with my man, David Goggins, of course. We did his book. That was incredible. He and I share a lot of the same thoughts, beliefs, things of that nature. The other one that's really, it was an honor to be a part of. There's 2, so I'm going to give you 3 of them. We published the book for the first Black woman in America to own $1 billion company. Most people think it's Oprah, and it's not. It's Janice Bryant Howroyd. And that was a true honor to publish her book, just given what she had accomplished. And then also when we published the book for the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, because that spoke to our quality. I mean, if the Nobel Peace Prize is going to allow you to publish their book, that really spoke to our quality. So those are my three that rank up there. Two that I'm excited about that are upcoming. You kind of caught me in the dilemma there, because some of them we can't say that they're coming out.
That's fair.
But I will give you this one. I'm really excited, and this is maybe what do they say, toot my own horn, pat myself on the back. I'm actually working on my second book right now. And
really?
I'm excited about that.
Oh, congratulations. That's
Thank you, sir.
Perfect little teaser to end the conversation with. Thank you so much for doing this, JeVon. It's like I said, it's a true honor to be able to have this conversation with you, and just to be able to witness the stuff that Scribe and you are doing. So thanks for coming on.
My man, Nicholas, you truly, with all sincerity, man, you made my day when you took it back to the book launch and met you and shook your hand. And I promise you, man, as soon as this whole virus thing clears up, you got to come by the office, man. Love to sit down with you again in person, and honored. And I feel very privileged that you shared that memory with me. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely. And I'll be the first, if the virus allows, I'll be the first to be at your second book signing.
I appreciate it, Nicholas.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Take care, JeVon. Have a good day.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.